Welcome back to Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and we're once again back to dissect the recent season of Doctor Who with the most recent episode, Dot and Bubble.
Mm.
So, from the outside looking in, this felt a lot like it was going to be the closest thing that this season had to a mid-season filler episode. Something
Yeah.
in a similar vein as like the Idiot's Lantern, Lazarus Experiment, Unicorn and the Wasp. Just that middle season episode that doesn't really impact the story too much and really is just there to pad out the episode count.
Yeah, and a
Not
sort of
not that
a
it necessarily looked bad, but it sort of had all the trappings of a. This looks like it's going to be a Black Mirror evils of technology episode that everyone's seen a million times before.
yeah. I mean, even with in Doctor Who, this sort of thing crops up a lot, and as you say, um, from an outsider's perspective, it does look, let's be honest, pretty generic.
Yeah,
And I think for most of the story, it feels generic. It's like, ooh, unga bunga, technology bad, those rotten kids and their dumb phones or technology or whatever it is, and yeah, there's something scary happening, but nothing like it's weird and freaky, but there's nothing super heavy about most of the story. It feels very, oh, okay, this is that episode. Then
yep. Then it happens. Then the last 5 minutes of the episode completely recontextualizes the whole thing, and it turns it from something that's honestly a little mediocre to something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about.
yep.
We'll get to there, and I guess the discussion for the most part is largely going to be: does the ending twist do
Like
enough
make
to
it.
justify the stuff
Yeah,
we've already seen a million times before?
yeah, I think it's both. It changes everything, I think. It changed basically everything for me,
Yeah.
but it made it richer for me. The I was noticing. I mean, I think I assume we're gonna have the same interpretation of that ending. We'll get to it.
Mm.
Um, it's pretty clear.
Yep.
But that really recontextualized everything that was happening uh in the previous 40 minutes, or almost
Hmm.
everything, to the point that I was picking up on small bits of dialogue even that I didn't the first time round, and it made it um pretty disturbing. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
and that's the general impression that I've gotten. I didn't rewatch the episode, but I saw specific moments repeated.
Hmm.
And it did make me go, "Oh my god!" Like
Yeah.
it made me question my own sense of media analysis, where I was like, "How did I not pick up on this stuff the first time around?"
I
And
think I think
it
sorry, go
does
ahead.
what a final twist should do. Again, there's always a
Yeah.
twist at the end,
Yeah.
but it changes what we know about the episode in a way that doesn't completely destroy what we already knew.
Yeah, it just recontextualizes it in a pretty radical way, but still, like, it still works.
Yeah,
I think I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast. I'm pretty sure I've said this to you personally. Um, but in my view, most like good twists, they're not actually twists, in the sense that when the twist happens, you realize, oh, all the pieces of information, all the
yeah,
puzzle pieces were there, we just didn't notice.
yes,
Um, and I think this is a classic example of that, where the twist, yes, radically recontextualizes the rest of the story, but it does so in a way that really elevates it, because as generic as this story seems, that's not how I felt in a second watch.
no.
Let's put it that way.
Before we
Oh
get
man.
to yeah, before we get too specific about any of that stuff, I think it's probably worth going through the story as a first-time viewer would, um, and then we can double back
Yes.
afterwards
Yeah,
and
sure.
highlight some areas that we felt changed on a rewatch or elements that are made more rich with its final context in mind.
Mm,
So we ourselves a lovely little Black Mirror world, the town of Fine Time, where
mm,
the upper elite send their millennials and it's essentially what it is. It's essentially
Hmm.
a Gen Z utopia. Everyone's on their phones all the time. In this case, they're the bubbles,
Hmm.
the dot and bubble of the title of
Hmm.
the episode.
Hmm.
And they just go about their business. They party, they have a good time, and they work a whole 2 hours a day. I mean,
Hmm.
God, can you? One thing I do like about this story is that it doesn't even without the final twist in mind, it doesn't really do a lot to paint this civilization in a positive mindset. Like even from the outset, it's clearly saying like fuck nepo babies, fuck the rich, and like yeah, good for Doctor Who to say that.
Yeah, there's a level of irony that runs throughout.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe that's because, RTD expects most Doctor Who fans to see that coming, right? It's like, oh,
Mm.
this is a utopia. Okay, where's the dystopia, guys? Where's that hiding?
Yeah, yeah.
But RTD makes it clear, almost from the outset, there's something so sort of forcibly saccharine and something so annoying about these people in this town. Like the
Yeah.
even I don't know. Maybe there's a way it's been directed and edited that enhances that.
I mean it could
Like,
be.
and also the performances. Like, I don't know. I should have looked this up. The woman who plays Lindy, it, it's more in reality, it's actually more disturbing than this. But throughout, especially those first two acts, God, she's annoying.
Yeah, and it's a good it's the actress's name is Callie Cook and she's had like
Mm,
some bit parts here and there. It looks like any role that she's had that's been a bit meatier hasn't lasted very long, but this is certainly her most mainstream part that she's been given. And the fact that
mm,
Lindy is so detestable and unlikable pretty much throughout the entire episode is really a testament to the actress, and I really hope that she doesn't get any online hate because
yeah,
of this role. Because
yeah,
we've seen it so many times where someone plays a thoroughly dislikable human being, and then the actor themselves cops a lot of the hate for it. I hope that
yeah.
doesn't
Which
happen
is
here
a
because
damn
she's
shame.
genuinely really good.
Yeah, it must be said, and again, we'll get into it into more detail, but that ending, her
Mm.
performance is really wonderful. Um, a lot of, uh, given how sort of surface level she appears as a character, especially in those first two acts, there's a lot of nuance and subtlety, I think, in the performance in the last act. It's really quite, it's chilling, really. Um,
Um,
so yeah.
where we get a lot. We actually did learn quite a lot of information in this cold open, where you basically get a speed run of a day in the life of a fine time citizen. You know, they wake up in the morning and instantly they put on their bubble. They have to be instructed to walk so that they don't run into anything, which immediately made me call to mind and this is going to sound, if you know me, this is going to sound like I'm pulling this reference out of my ass because it's just something that is pertinent to me, but it reminded me of the Pokemon Go craze of 2016 when that game was just kicking off.
Mm.
um, because there were people that would just walk off cliffs while playing the game and not like be paying attention to their surroundings. So the fact that this is implemented here, it's like, okay, I know there are people who are going to be like, "Oh, this is completely unrealistic," but no, it's just not.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Like, there was a moment, especially when Lindy turns off her dot and bubble and she has to walk on her own and she keeps bumping into things. At first I thought, oh, do I really buy that? But then the more I thought about it, no, I do. I think that the human brain, I mean, granted, I'm not a scientist, this is just my opinion, but I think it can be very plastic. It's surprisingly easy to, um, I guess, alter it, I suppose. And granted, there's some personal experience coming in here because one, I've hallucinated, and two, I'm also brain damaged. So, like, I realize that. But I think it's true. Like these people in Fine Time have been conditioned, I suppose is a good way of putting it, to really not look past, the length of their noses, almost quite literally. And that even thematically is kind of interesting because I think that actually fits into the ending in terms of the way that this society is very insular, and you get a very clear picture. throughout the story, but particularly with the ending of how narrow-minded these people have been conditioned to become, which is chilling.
Yeah. Well, it's also to me it read as like a really just a big confidence thing as well. Like
Mm,
the fact that they have become so reliant on this technology that without it they are just so uncertain of how to walk forward and what direction forward
yeah.
is just like really really sad. Um,
Mm,
but then we learn that there are citizens of Fine Time who are not online when they should be, and they are, as it turns out, going missing because they're being eaten by giant slugs. Which again is a sentence that just you say as a Doctor Who fan, and you just accept it
oh, yeah.
really
That
really
that no
fast.
In fact, that's the weirdest part is that's the most normal element of this whole story.
Yeah,
Basically, that's oh god, that's funny. But yeah, they are,
yeah,
to an extent I can't believe I'm gonna say this. They are, to an extent, terminally online, you could say.
yeah, yeah. We learn in not in the episode, but in behind the scenes footage, we learn they're called man traps. That's the name of the monster in this episode.
Right.
Um, the
Okay.
the design is really really icky and cool, and like
Mm.
it's the like I think I said this um offline between episodes, but it's the closest thing that we've come this season to like an out and out monster.
Yeah.
Or at the very least the monster of the week. I think Maestro is
Yeah.
probably the other thing that would count towards that, but Maestro
But
seems
even
more
then, it's a bit of a
connected to the
different thing.
Pantheon and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bogeyman from episode one wasn't really a monster by the end,
Yeah.
and it's also made me realize that this series so far has just had like a big overall lack of masterminding, scheming villains. I think Maestro is probably the closest thing we've come so
Yeah.
far to like a
Yeah.
big antagonist we got to take down. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think that like uh our villains when they have been like abjectly villainous have been way more like concept rich
Mm.
like than tangibly there to fight. The
Yeah, I
villain
mean,
guard algorithm is also something that springs to mind on this as well.
yeah, well, and again, we'll get into this in more detail with this episode, but certainly with this episode and Boom, there's eh, the big villain is kind of it seems to me these sort of institutions, I suppose,
Yeah,
that sort of impact people's lives on these horrifying levels. So that's interesting, and it's good though because it's a departure in some ways because, as you say, we're not getting a villain of the week with this
yeah,
series, but for Doctor Who, and I think that's what I find interesting about it. Um, and you say that the man traps that they're the closest thing to monster of the week. I think this is a small tangent, but I think that's partly because they are a horde, right?
yeah,
Um, Whereas when we've had villains this season, they've been sort of singular,
yeah, totally.
I suppose. I mean, if you can, maybe the goblins a little bit, but even then, I think
Yeah,
it's
you
a
got the
bit different.
goblins and the villain guard ambulances are
Yeah.
probably the closest things. Like I did say that I'm not missing big bad like antagonists, but I am sort of looking forward to next week when presumably Jonathan Groff is going to be playing our main antagonist for the episode. It's going to be nice to get back onto a more typical antagonist trope because while I am enjoying
Yeah.
these slightly more abstract villains, I am slightly worried that we've had too many of them so
Mm.
far this season. Because, like I said,
Yeah.
Maestro and then presumably Jonathan Groff, and then we have the finale.
Yeah.
I
Which
think,
could be almost anything, I guess. We'll see how
yeah.
it goes.
But anyway, back to the man traps. I
Mm,
feel like their presence and behavior throughout the first two acts of the episode are where most of the enjoyment for me came from in the first like half hour or so, and that is just the mystery around how they behave. There's the
mm,
the the Doctor asked the question several times: why are they ignoring some people and attacking others? And before we see directly someone, I think it's Gothic Paul. No, it's I know it is Gothic Paul.
Yeah.
Who has a man trap come up behind him while he's talking. My assumption was, and it was going to be because I'm watching the whole episode at this point, assuming that this is just going to be a boomer take on phones, right? So my assumption was that the man traps, how their deal was, is that they're just walking around minding their own business, and people on their bubbles are just walking into their open mouths, oblivious to their
Mm.
surroundings. I
Yeah.
assumed that was going to be what we learned about these creatures, but
Yeah.
that doesn't end up being the case as we see, and in
No.
fact, like it's the case of like the more we learn about how they operate, the more tantalizing that the mystery becomes, and I think that's again probably one of the stronger elements of the story in the first chunk.
Mm. I mean, I th I think you're relatively right there. Um, there is a consistent element of mystery around them because in the end, you don't even really find out what they are or what they're about. There's reference to the fact that they've been created by
Yeah,
like a program or some sort of technology that maybe built Find Time, but then it's never given a clear explanation, which is another interesting subversion because in most Doctor Who stories, you'd get some, I think, better indication of what a monster like that would be and their origins and whatnot. Um, for me, though, even in those first two acts, I don't think that was the most interesting part for me. I think it was intriguing, and I like the way
yeah,
that they handled it, but for me, I think it was more the characterizations. I was given how unbelievably frustrating Lindy
yeah.
was, even in those first two acts, um, I was surprisingly invested. Oh, um, yeah, she's a pretty rotten person, but maybe she can learn something here. Maybe she can grow. Maybe she can, test her mouth to become a better person. Um, I mean, that all gets completely scuppered with
Well, yeah,
one of the things that happens in the third act, which we'll get to. But
yes.
generally speaking, that was the most interesting arc to me. I
Well, I
think it was
think well
because
that's also like
mm,
the one of the strengths of the episode before that we get the rug pulled out from under us is that you're
mm,
watching it expecting it to be a typical Doctor Who story,
yeah,
and we're expecting to see this character overcome their flaws and become a better person based on their encounter with the Doctor, which is the typical arc for a single episode Doctor Who supporting character.
yeah,
So we're watching that and we're seeing her again learn how to walk and you know uh, go from someone who goes like, "Oh, what are you saying? You're obviously wrong about all this stuff," to someone who, you know, after learning that the slugs are real, be the person to say to their friends, "Okay, everyone, listen to me. We have to do something about
yeah,
this." Like, take that
yeah.
first
We've
step
seen
to
this
being a
before.
bit
We've
more
seen this sort of
proactive.
thing
Yeah,
before.
yeah. Of course, hidden in all that is the toxicity that is Lindy Pepperbean. And again, it's all there the entire time.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's so difficult to talk about this without having that final context in mind. I almost want
Yeah.
to jump straight to Ricky September at this point. It's like because I think
I'll. Oh yeah. No, go ahead.
well that is sort of like we were saying at the start. It's like the final ending twist does a lot to recontextualize, and I do think that that first watch it can be a bit of a slog to get through at times because again in the first chunk there is really not much happening, and I think that is down to the fact that we do have to sort of reteach one of our characters how to walk, and so and so it is a bit slow.
See, I didn't. I can understand that criticism. I didn't find it to be slow, mainly because there's a level of irony and humor. Because it's
Well, yeah,
like,
well that
you,
certainly helps, but it does mean that
mm,
like when we're discussing it now, we can't really sort of go scene by scene and go like, oh, and then this happens, which leads to this. Like last week with 73 yards, that plot flies. and there's always
And there's a
something
lot that
happening in
happens
every
in it.
scene, and yeah, and there's always something happening in every scene that's worth commenting on.
Mm.
But here it's kind of like,
Mm,
okay, the stuff that we have is good, and it is like when it's not actively moving, it's doing stuff like building tension and building intrigue and setting up what will end up being an incredible payoff of a
mm,
final scene.
mm.
But it does sort of mean that, like, it isn't as jam packed with memorable things
Yeah, yeah, I
from a
can
first
understand
watch
that.
perspective, at least.
I think, again, I wasn't bothered by that, but I can certainly understand the criticism because it is, well, yeah, as you say, there isn't heaps and heaps happening in it, and what is happening, certainly without that ending, seems very generic. I
Hmm.
mean, like I brought up the whole, the very sort of boomerish Unga
Yeah.
Bunga technology bad angle. Sam spoke to us
Yes, I was.
and
Yeah.
kind of rightly pointed out. I think that seems to be what the episode is veering towards, or at least I think as
Mm.
she
Well,
sort
I
of
think
said,
I think yeah, I forget how exactly she phrased it, but I think her overall point was that while the final twist is incredible at recontextualizing it, the
"Mm,
first 40 minutes plays plays into the expectations of the
yeah,
episode so much that it could be to its detriment.
yeah,
That
yeah,
when you're watching it fully expecting the typical boomer talks down to millennials about the evils of their phones storyline, and it plays it for the most part straight, like for a whole
yeah,
last 40
it's hard
minutes
to
or
take
so.
that seriously.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do, I think it is the sort of thing. Whereas if you have that in mind throughout the episode and you can't like, and in that, and it's not unfair to
no,
see
no,
that and go, this is a flaw because I'm expecting more out of my Doctor Who,
yeah, yeah,
and I
um,
do sort of think that in that regard, and that comes back to what I was saying about the first part, like the significant chunk of the episode being a bit slow and playing it too straight.
mm,
I would have liked maybe like one or two more unique angles or twists in the first 35 minutes
yeah, yeah,
to sort of hide the fact that on the surface it is what it is. Because if,
yeah.
again, it is what it is and it does it so well that, I don't know, it's just weird.
No, no, no. I think that's fair, and I can understand. Excuse me. I can understand Sam's criticism, um, because it is getting it straight for most of its runtime, and it didn't bother me personally, but that might just because I have a lot of faith in sort of RTD's writing, and also the fact that um I think we've been told by RTD and even really in the show that this season is different. So
Mhm.
I don't know if would say I was like seriously expecting anything super different, but I thought, oh, they're probably not going to be so ignorant as to just have a straight up, ooh, technology bad message. Surely, we've moved on from that at this point, haven't we? Like, and the thing is, I've been critical of that sort of messaging in Doctor Who before. In
Yeah.
the Cyberman episodes, I was very frustrated with how they dealt with it. So I thought, oh, surely they've matured from that. But the interesting thing is, I saw an interview with RTD recently where he said that I think a bulk of this script had been written way back in 2010.
Yes.
Um,
Well, at the very least, the idea came initially in
yeah,
2010.
and but that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because until that ending, it feels like a sort of generic technology bad sci-fi story from the 2010s, right?
Yeah, if this episode had ended 5 minutes early, it would have fit right in the Chibnall era. As one of those like surface level, doesn't have anything else beneath the surface to discuss. It is what it is. Social commentary things really akin to Orphan 55. Like if you replace the final 5 minutes with of deeper complexity with 5 minutes of the Doctor explaining to the camera why we should get off our phones and go for a hike, it is just
Touch.
Orphan 55 again.
Remember, everybody, the doctor says touch grass.
Yeah, exactly.
But that honestly, that's a good point. I don't want to believe that, but no, you're right. Like that, I want to believe that there's more nuance and more subtlety in the
Well,
rest
they
of the
well,
story, but
no,
it
no,
really
they're
only
definitely. Well, there definitely is, because like the characters in Orphan 55 aren't intentionally being written as the most annoying people on the planet.
Mm,
Here they are, and that is to the episode's strength. Where like
yeah,
this episode knows what it's trying to. It knows what it wants to present itself as, and it's sort of lampshading that throughout. Whereas Orphan
yeah,
55 is played completely straight, and it just falls
yeah,
apart as a result. Like
mm,
like obviously, this is even without the last 5 minutes. This is still head and shoulders above most of Chibnall's contributions during
yeah,
his.
yeah, yeah.
I'm not trying to say that, but like
Yeah,
that kind of tone and messaging is completely uh, typical of the
yes,
social commentary that we've been getting in Doctor Who for a while.
yeah, and even sci-fi, generally, I think you're right to point out, and I sort of pointed this out earlier, but the throughout that first like 40 minutes, the irony is there, and that does
Mm,
enhance it. But you're right
yes.
to point out that um beyond the irony, it does seem a bit generic, and it very easily could have been just a generic, get off those phones, you rotten kids,
Mm.
sort of messaging. It could have easily been that. And so I think you and Sam even is right to point out, um, yeah, that could be a bit of a barrier, a bit of a problem. I think it is, for me personally, basically completely rectified with the ending, but
Oh yeah.
in terms of consistent investment, I can understand why that would be frustrating to viewers.
Well, yeah. It's the kind of thing where it's like the ending completely recontextualizes it, and in my opinion, it like to the point where it's in a completely different episode. But if without that
Mm,
context, you are left sitting there for 40 minutes going, okay, I know what this is, I know what this is, and
yeah,
it can leave a bad taste in your mouth. So yeah.
yeah. It's like it's fun, I guess, seeing the very annoying sort of Lindy, sort of testing her metal and changing kind of, and the levels of irony that sort of come along
Mm,
with that. But
yeah.
um, you know, the audience may be left wondering how strong is it, that first 40 minutes. So yeah, that I think
Yeah,
that's all
exactly.
fair.
Um, so then we have the character of Ricky September, um,
Yeah.
who, in my opinion, is the first indication in the episode that this isn't just a boomer writing about technology, because this is the like he's shown in the episode. It's not really highlighted very well, but we see when his profile comes up that it's like when people's profiles come up on screen, it shows like how many followers they have.
Mm,
And when Ricky comes up, I don't know if you noticed this, but when Ricky comes up, his follower count is listed as everyone.
mm. Yeah,
So
I noticed that at the start.
he's clearly meant to be the TikTok dancer, the influencer, that kind of thing. And the fact
Yeah.
that they don't characterize him as an attention seeking, vain hungry psychopath who's an
Mm,
egotist and only cares about the
mm,
numbers. The fact that they
mm.
actually characterize him as a human being is the first indication to me that it's like, okay, so he's not just a boomer mystified by technology. There is a point to all this.
Yeah.
It's good to know that there's at least one person in Fine Time that might be different from the rest.
Mhm.
We never find out exactly what his stance is on the final episode's um, topic because he doesn't live to see it, obviously.
Mm.
Um, and it's also interesting to see a character who would fill the role of the Doctor if he was able to be there. Like he's doing all the stuff that the Doctor would.
Mm.
He even like works out or knows at least how to put the codes in before the Doctor explains it. So he's, for all intents and purposes, the Doctor while the Doctor
Yeah.
isn't there.
Yeah. Also, small thing, would this be classed as a Doctor Light episode? I
See,
mean,
yeah, I mean
hmm,
that's interesting. I don't think it is because he is like pretty much there. Like he's not there in person, but
but he's present in some
he's
form.
present throughout the episode. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
like this isn't like other Doctor Light episodes where the Doctor's absence is like noteworthy. He's there and he's doing stuff, but he's just not
Yeah.
on screen doing it.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is another case of like let's write an episode where Shooty Gardwa is in one scene and can be in front of a green screen the rest of the time because he's still doing sex education.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I have the suspicion that even if that wasn't the case, this episode would have been written exactly the same way because otherwise the story isn't nearly as good.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, maybe not a Doctor Light episode, but it was just interesting, I guess, that they
Yeah,
made that choice. Again, a little bit subversive, which is kind of neat.
yeah. Look, that being, I did just say that Ricky was my first indication of, Russell is not doing the boomer thing, but
Mm.
Ricky is responsible for the one line that did make me go, oh, which is when Ricky says, no, I'm not on my bubble all the time. I actually read books sometimes. And I was like, okay, that falls perfectly in line with the classic thing of like, put your phone down, go read a book.
Yeah, it's funny, but like as I said, at least some of this story seems to have been written in the early 2010s.
Yeah,
That makes sense with lines like that, but then there are other bits, especially with the ending, where it's like,
yeah.
oh, this is a very 2020 sort of story, I think.
Mhm.
That's I think anyway. So yeah, but that line about the books, I'd forgotten that he said that, but yeah, it's a fair point. It's not terrible, but
No.
yeah, like it sticks out a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, and like I said, I was so ready for Russell to write us a evil influencer character. Like when
Mm.
the Doctor and Ruby are piecing together the alphabetical nature of the attacks, the entire time I'm just standing there going, Ricky's been facing away from Lindy the entire time. Is that because he's hiding an evil smirk and he's been responsible the whole time? Because I also pieced together, oh, Ricky's got all the followers, so perhaps uh, the monsters are using his friends list to find their targets
Mm.
because,
Mm.
or his follower list rather, because they're his creation. And also when he hides the fact that Homeworld has been completely destroyed by these things,
Yeah.
I was like, that could just be to spare Lindy any heartache, but it might also be
But
to
there is
lead her
a
along.
and that's great because it's in another show, if that character was revealed to be a villain,
Hmm.
that itself might be kind of subversive in a twist, but that's quite generic for Doctor Who. So it's
Yeah.
interesting that they go another route, but they still throw you all these sort of red herrings, which is
Yeah, the red
kind of
herrings.
great.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's the red herrings that really um, yeah, there's just so many of them, and I was ready to be hooked by any of them, and to predict. I
Yeah.
was ready to sit here in this discussion and be like, I predicted this episode. I
Yeah,
saw it
it's like
coming.
because we've seen this stuff happen before, the evil human collaborator,
Yeah,
the twist villain. We've seen this a number of times in Doctor Who. So
yeah,
that feels like something that the episode would do.
yes,
Um,
and it sort of does
yeah.
because this is when we get our first like absolutely soul crushing moment in this episode, which is when Lindy completely unapologetically and without remorse throws Ricky, who has been nothing but gentle and sweet and patient, completely under the bus just to give herself a bit more time to escape.
Yeah.
And you could argue that it wasn't really necessary. Like the Ricky is a smart person; they could have found a way to stall a little bit longer, but instead she just completely goes,
Yeah.
"Fuck you, Ricky. Your last name begins with a C. Therefore, kill him first."
Yeah.
Literally human
Um,
shielding. It's pretty disgusting.
yeah, that was shocking. That really somehow not the most shocking part of the episode, but still shocking. Uh, yeah, that really that got to me. And even just on a smaller detail, um the way Ricky dies by having the
Oh,
dot basically launched through his skull like a bullet. At least I'm pretty sure that's what the
yeah,
direction was saying
yeah.
there.
That's
Um,
specifically what happened. Yeah.
that kind of fucked me up. I'm not gonna lie. Oh, that
Yeah,
was
it's like
hmm.
it's just the complete and utter remorselessness of both Lindy, but then also in how Ricky dies. Like,
Because you
yeah,
almost
yeah,
because like the bubble, it's got this evil, scary, evil robot, red eye sort of thing.
Yeah.
So you almost expect it to be like a laser, maybe a laser that's just gonna disintegrate somebody. It's so much more disturbing than that, and it's
Yeah.
kind of great in how again, I think it is a little bit subversive.
Well,
I
of
think
course,
it
yeah.
shows that RTD isn't fucking around here, which is
Well, yeah, because this is the
yeah,
first, like I said, it's the first indication that there's something more going on. Because
yeah,
this is the first time that we completely deviate from the traditional Doctor Who narrative. Because the
yeah,
entire time we're watching this episode, hoping that Lindy can change,
yeah,
and we're
and grow as a
hoping that she
person.
can work through her character flaws and become a better
Mm,
person. But like I said, she straight up kills Ricky, and then we see her afterwards just walking through, going, "Oh, thank goodness, I made it."
yeah,
And at that point, you're
and
just
then
like,
lying.
okay, then lying about it, yeah, as well.
Yeah,
Um, at that point, that's when I really leant forward in my chair.
yeah, that was that was the yeah,
Yeah,
that was
because I
the
was
key
because
moment.
that was me going, okay, we've got about 5 minutes left of the story. There, she's about to meet the doctor. He's probably going to work out what she did. Are we going to get some big argument between the two of them to end
Yeah,
the episode? That's where I
because
thought it
that
was going
again,
after that.
that feels like a Doctor Who thing. It's like, no, you can't just sacrifice a human life like that. That feels like a
Yeah,
Doctor speech, right?
it
Um,
does. Yeah,
but we don't get that. And I will also point out, and I mentioned this earlier, but what's the name of the actor who plays Lindy? Pardon me,
Ali
remind me again.
Cook.
Callie Cook. Callie Cook's performance in that
Oh,
moment when she's lying and she's got tears in her eyes, it's so great. It's so
yeah,
chilling because there's so many layers because it's like she's traumatized by what just happened, but maybe she feels guilty, but it's also fucked that she's sort of happy that she just escaped, and it's also even more fucked up that she's lying now. So it just again, there's a whole heap of layers there. That happen all at once, and
yeah,
I
completely.
think that's tough to do. Um, and it's very admirable that the story goes that way, which is kind of great.
Yeah. Um, and then just when you thought there was no more rug to pull out from under you,
Just when you thought your soul couldn't be crushed even more.
we then get our first taste of what I'm going to say was the inevitable result of Shooty Gartner's casting. And that is, uh, you know, characters being racist towards the Doctor.
Yeah, and
And can I just say that I think you brought this up in Devil's Cord,
mm,
where you were like, why is everyone just listening to him? It's the 60s. You know, and you sort of intimated that it shouldn't be that easy.
mm,
And to that I say, well, I'm really, really glad that they saved it for this
oh
because
yeah,
it is so, so much more powerful to have a story set in the future
yeah,
be the one that addresses racism.
yeah. It's again, it's subversive because we would expect, right? Um, a historical story. Yeah, there's got to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
like racists in it. I mean, this goes back to Capaldi punching a racist in the face, right? This is
Hmm.
stuff we've seen before. But the fact that it's in the future, like,
Yeah.
man, weren't expecting that, were you?
Yeah, and I was sitting in my chair like, holy shit, this
Yeah,
is a cyberpunk story.
and they went and they went there, and it's just it is. I hate to use such a generic phrase, but genuinely, it's quite mind blowing that you
Yeah.
just the fact that RTT had the courage to do that.
But I also really appreciate the way the entire exchange is scripted.
Yeah.
You know, that the fine time residents find moral justification in their actions and almost deliberately dance around straight up calling it like it is. It makes the
Mm.
entire encounter not only feel very real. Again, I say this with zero experience, being subjected to this kind of thing, but it
Mm.
feels like a real conversation. But it also is a conversation that doesn't feel ham-fisted in its delivery.
Yeah, I
And it
was
lets the audience
mm.
it lets the audience get to the conclusion on its own. And
Yeah, which
again,
is
it's something that I
great.
really, really appreciate because there's no time racist like in Rosa straight up saying you're kind. You know, like we
Yeah.
get the word, we get voodoo, and we get contamination, like and
And
stuff like
because
that.
and the one line that really cements the racism part of it is when Lindy says to the doctor, and I've written this down, she says, "Because you, sir, are not one of us."
Hmm.
Like, these are they feel like dog whistles, basically. Like,
Exactly.
they're
Yeah.
not explicitly saying it, but we know, what they're saying, and which makes it really all the more disgusting. It's
Yeah. Completely.
shocking, and I would just like to bring up something here. I mentioned that I mean, obviously this story recontextualizes everything, but I mentioned that it recontextualizes even the small conversations. There
Mhm.
are so many moments in this story where
Oh.
Lindy's talking, especially to the doctor, that
Yeah.
I didn't pick up on the first time, but the second time I'm like, wow, that's fucked. Like there's
Yeah. Like she expresses glee at being like, I can't wait until you get arrested for this.
or when she says, "Oh, I was so right to hate you," or I think this is the one that really got to me. She says, "Oh, no, no, guys, we need to listen to him. I think he's not as stupid as he looks." I mean,
Well, and there's more than that. I don't know if you noticed this one, but there's a moment like halfway in the episode where she says something like, "Wait a minute, you're the same guy as earlier. I didn't recognize you immediately."
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and again, like, and I think I keep seeing people online talking about how the episode does a fantastic job with the microaggressions, which are just like
Mm,
all over the place, you know.
mm,
Um, and again, like small recontext. The moment that I can't stop thinking about how genius it is with the recontextualizing
mm.
is when Lindy first realizes that the Doctor and Ruby are in the same room with each other. Because the first time you watch
Oh,
it,
of
you're just
course.
thinking, "Oh, she's not used to like people being like
In the same physical
it's a social.
space, but like,
You're thinking it's like a personal contact thing, and we do get hints of that with like they haven't been hugged before or anything like that. But you think
yeah,
it's just a wait a minute, you're talking to someone in person, and
yeah.
then the whole time
It's like,
the
oh, you're,
episode is hiding that they think it's completely wrong for black people and white people to be in the same room
yeah.
together.
Like Lindy assumes that
Yeah.
Ruby and the Doctor must be segregated in some way,
Yes.
which is fucked.
That is genius.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
But
Um,
then and then you start thinking, right? Like as soon as the show puts that seed in your head about this is what it's all been
mm,
about the entire time, you then start thinking back to like from literally from the beginning of the episode, like it's not an episode about the dangers of technology. It's an
no, it's
episode
not.
about the dangers of echo chamber culture. They
Yeah,
are literally living in a bubble.
yeah, they're in a horrifying, seemingly very homogenous
Mhm.
area. I mean,
Yeah, and it's
have
something
you
that
noticed?
I'm ashamed to say that I didn't realize until the end that every Fine Time Citizen really kind of looks the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you notice that? Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I even said to you and Sam when we were discussing this that yes, it's not a Unga Bunga technology bad story. It is a it's a story of the prisons of bigotry and privilege and how they trap people.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think it's also like for me, it's especially this element is especially sold with the ending, but because it's implied that they're all basically heading for their deaths,
Oh
and you
yeah.
do kind of feel sorry for them because they're doomed. But like, I think it shows like how much of a problem these issues are on a systemic level, right? Like
Yeah.
they've
Yeah.
all been raised in presumably the same horrible culture,
Yeah.
and we see the absolutely disastrous effects of it.
Mm.
Um,
Well, these are people who, at least in Lindy's case, half an hour ago couldn't even walk on their own. And
yeah.
now they're convinced that they'll be able to rebuild a civilization because they've been raised thinking that they're superior.
Also, fuck. I just realized something. Another line that I can't believe I didn't notice.
Yeah.
When the guy near the end, the guy who appoints himself leader, uh,
Yeah.
when he says, "Oh, we'll colonize the place just like our ancestors."
Yep. Yep.
Oh my god!
And it's like
Holy
I
shit!
and like the assumption that you initially have when they leave is that they're doomed to head into the mouth of a man trap. But I think the implication is actually worse than that. I think the implication is that they're not going to get eaten by man traps, but they're instead going to die a horrible death of starvation and exposure in the wilderness, as all these people who have completely zero survival skills whatsoever are just,
Mm,
essentially brainwash themselves into thinking that they have the skills needed to survive in the wilderness,
yeah,
despite the fact that they have a perfectly good option in the doctor that they're just refusing to take because of the purity of
yeah,
the bloodline and whatever
yeah,
whatever nonsense that they're,
yeah.
you know that they've convinced themselves of. And this, I mean, we've been waiting for the darker side of Ncuti Gatwa's performance and
Oh,
characterization
how
of the
how
doctor to come
genius is
out.
it? How
Oh
brilliant
my
is
god.
it in the end? I just
This, I think I've been seeing, and I'm pretty sure this is the first scene that Ncuti filmed as the Doctor outside of the giggle,
hmm
and you couldn't tell. Like, this is what I've been saying about
mm,
Shooty's confidence in the role, and it's like, I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, where I was like, I've never seen a Doctor Who actor this set in the role this early in their tenure.
mm.
He's just brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That ending where he's sort of laughing and then screaming,
Mhm.
and it breaks your heart,
Yeah,
really.
and I especially love that, like, his approach once he pieces together what's going on. He doesn't try to, like, change the system in one conversation. He doesn't try to talk the characters out of being racist because he knows it's a
Mm,
lost cause.
yep.
He's just trying to get them to listen to reason by saying, "Look, think what you want, but you're going to die out there. So even for just a minute, come with me and I'll find you a place to live."
Yeah.
Like, he's appealing to this. He's trying to appeal to whatever logic that they've got, and then when that doesn't work, he's just completely lost. And God, like,
And it's
and
funny
mm,
sorry, go ahead.
no, you start.
You say that this is, Doctor Who at its most Black Mirror, but in a way it kind of is because
Yeah,
for want of a better phrase, the level of maturity in this sort of thematic expression, I would expect that from Black Mirror, but it's not that common to Doctor Who, I don't think.
no,
There
no,
are
it's not.
there are similar themes of bigotry dealt with in Doctor Who for sure, but not on this level, and not in such a bleak way. And I'll make a claim here, which may be a bit bold, so bear with me. I think this, even in context of how dark 73 Yards is in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
I think this might be the darkest Doctor story I've seen in a long time.
it's definitely the
Like a
darkest
real
ending.
long time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's this is it like, and again, like, in terms of bleak endings, this is definitely one of the bleaker ones that we've had.
Mhm.
And I again compare this to Orphan 55, where the story ends with the TARDIS crew realizing that Earth is doomed to nuclear winter, and that's the end of the story. But that ending is dog shit and ham-fisted, and
Yeah.
it shoves its messaging down your throat so much that it loses all impact. Here again, it's just subtle enough to leave you going, "Holy shit, this is happening," and it
Yeah.
just leaves both you and the characters in the show to accept the reality of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's way more impactful than either the Doctor giving an anti-phone speech, an anti-self preservation speech, an anti-racism speech. He just lets that moment sit there, and
Yeah. It's a show
I
not tell moment, and it's
yeah,
brilliant.
and I think it also brings up a darker side to this character, that he
Mm.
doesn't decide to just use his TARDIS to save them anyway. Like, he could just materialize the TARDIS around them while they're on their vessel and go, "Well, too bad. I've saved you anyway. Now get the hell off my ship. And
Yeah, but he
I've taken
knows that
you."
even if he does that, they're not gonna go with it.
Well, it's also more about, and I think this is what I picked up on in the last shot of the episode, where he looks back at them and then just sort of just his face just completely falls. I think he's had that thought process of like, well, this is what they've chosen, and I'm just gonna
Yeah.
leave them to it.
Yeah.
And
I
I
love
think,
also. Sorry,
yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
just, well, I think that's just it's such a better. Like I said, we talk about the darker side of the Doctor that we love to see, and I think this is at least the beginnings of seeing the 15th Doctor's darker side, where he's just
Mm,
like, well,
sure.
you've shown that you're irredeemable, so I'm just going to leave you to die. Good luck.
And yeah, like it's the darkness is very clear.
Hmm.
I think. Um, and it gets cemented for me in the last shot we get of Lindy.
Yeah,
The look on her face
yeah, it's
of
smug
pure
and dignified.
disdain and hatred is so chilling.
Yeah.
And the fact that she's sort of now that she's with everybody from Fine Time again, and she's sort of choked down all of the trauma that she just had to experience with Ricky's September dying, and she's sort of repressing all that emotion. The fact that she's sort of shut down to this mode of just pure hatred is absolutely terrifying. Um,
Mm. And there's also something
Jesus
about the ending
Christ.
that I think is a bit underrated, and it's
Hmm.
the characterization of Ruby throughout this scene as well. 'Cause again, once
Yeah.
she realizes what's going on, she's sort of she's bewildered by it,
Yeah.
and then like you can watch her in the final exchange, especially while the Doctor's having his big blowout. She wants to comfort him,
Mm,
but she doesn't know how.
yeah.
She keeps going to put a hand on his shoulder, and then just being like, "Well, that's clearly not enough. Like, what do I do here?"
Mm,
And in the end, she just walks back to the TARDIS because she can't find the words.
yeah. For sure.
And I think that is like it's so real,
Mm,
because what can you say in that moment?
yeah.
What can you say?
Mm.
Like the again, I'm just imagining like how something like this would have been handled in the Chibnall era, where it's like the Doctor let's substitute the racism in this episode for say sexism because that would be
Mm,
the closest analog we have from the 15th Doctor to the 13th Doctor,
sure.
right? Let's say Fine Time is made up exclusively of incel um uh alpha males, and I use that in air quotes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
who
I know what you
refuse.
mean.
Yeah, and then like you have the 13th Doctor just standing there being like, they didn't want help because they don't, whatever. And then I can so easily see like Ryan or Graham or even Dan turning around and going, "Don't worry, Doctor, we would never do that to you." you know, there's that classic "we're the good
Yeah.
ones" kind of
Yeah.
speech
Yeah.
that would be completely misinterpreted and like completely out of place
And
and leave a
really
bad taste in your
ham-fisted
mouth.
as well.
And anyone listening to this saying, "Well, I think you're reaching a bit," don't forget that Chibnall literally had a police officer say to Ryan, "Don't worry, I would never arrest you for no reason, not like the other cops."
Oh.
So it's not
Oh, dear.
something that wouldn't happen, but
Mm,
instead we're left with Ruby, who isn't trying to be written as, you know, a pillar of moral virtue, who isn't trying to be written as the good white person.
mm,
She's presented with all the same flaws that anyone would have in this situation where she
mm.
doesn't know what to say. And in
Yeah.
the end fails to
Sure.
comfort the Doctor in this moment
Mm,
that has really stunned him.
yeah.
And I think that's so much more powerful in this moment than
Mm,
just having a character literally say any words at all.
mm. It's, it's powerful stuff, to
Mm.
be sure. Um, yeah. I think there's also something else I wanted to just talk about with Ruby. This is a small thing. But the
Mm.
fact that she's immediately introduced as, pretending to be someone from this marketing team, I quite
Yeah.
like that because, that's helping with Ruby's characterization and showing how, I suppose, hands-on she is and how gung ho she is about going on these adventures with the Doctor, but also being smart and
Yeah.
being willing to take these risks. Whereas, even for companions that we really like even Martha, I imagine it would take several, like a lot of episodes to get to that point where she's that willing to
Well,
take that initiative. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. You would
well,
have a better
no. I
take than
mean,
I do, but
well, that maybe that's where maybe we're seeing the influence of the lived experience from 73 yards there, where you know
mm,
the residual memory of being proactive.
yeah, has stuck around
Mm.
because
But
there's
it's also
Mhm,
another like subtle layer of misdirection, right? Because the Doctor first tries the direct approach and it fails. So then they've clearly gone, okay, Ruby, you try. Say that you're from a marketing agency or whatever.
mm,
And at the first time around, you're thinking, okay, they've found a different way of
mm,
getting through to these people. But then, in the back
mm,
of your mind, at the end of the episode, it's like, no, it didn't work for that reason. It worked because Ruby is a 19-year-old blonde white woman.
yep, boy howdy, and it
Yeah.
just again, this is why I say that that twist makes the story so much richer because rather than Lindy being like her attitude, I guess, or her self-centeredness and mean-spiritedness, it's not just an example of a impetuous youth, right? It's not just
Yeah.
someone being, "Oh, fuck off, older people. I know what I'm doing." No, it's an indication of something far deeper and nastier that
Yeah.
is really chilling on a rewatch to the point that once you watch this episode once and you watch it again, almost every time that Lindy speaks, especially when she's speaking to Ruby and extra especially to the Doctor, you just hate her with every minute.
Completely. Yeah.
Because you know what this is all indicating, right?
Yeah.
You know the deeper and very disturbing implications that are being made here. Um, so yeah, unless
I
you
don't
have
have
anything else to
much.
add, Cuff, that's
Oh, one thing is that based on the alphabetical nature of the killings, it's an absolute tragedy that Dr. P didn't live through the end of the episode.
yeah.
Doctor, it's
Um,
just such a fun little world building detail that, like, I mean, if these characters can't walk without assistance, obviously they wouldn't be able to do bodily functions without being told to by a friendly face. And,
yeah.
you know,
And
it's
again,
just, yeah,
that's the brilliance of it because it would have been so easy for that to come across as so stupid. It's like, oh, what is RTD saying that, in the future people will be so addicted to their phones they can't do the most basic things possible. Oh, that's so dumb. No, but it's not indicating that. It's indicating something else. And again, something far more disturbing. This isn't,
exactly, yeah.
as I said, this isn't, ooh, technology bad. This is a group of people who have been brought up in from the looks of it, a very homogenous area who
Yeah,
probably have been raised even away from fine time. They've been raised in a very racist society. Um, and it has not only has that sort of brain rot infected their brains in the way that they interact with people, but that level of and that, I guess that combination of racism and privilege has made it so they can't do the most basic shit. Like it's just a brilliant masterstroke, really.
mm.
It's just
Well,
it's so good.
I think earlier I called this episode cyberpunk, which
Mhm.
is like a bit disingenuous to like the presentation, but that's
Oh no, the ethos.
genuinely
No,
what
I
it
I
is.
totally know what you mean.
The
Yeah.
whole point of cyberpunk is, what if our technology advances but we're unable to solve the actual problems in our society? That's on
Mm.
full display here.
Yeah. It's
And
not.
like,
It's
yeah,
it's kind of like what I said with the Cybermen stories. The real point that those episodes sort of gets at, but doesn't really
mm,
quite get to is the problem isn't the technology; it's the means that society puts it to.
yes,
Um, I don't think that's like the big main message of this story, but it's closer to that vein, I think.
Sure.
And that's where that, as you say, cyberpunk ethos certainly comes through.
Yes. But other than that, I think I'm done talking about this one. It's God. I don't even know
This
what score to give this one.
look, pardon me. Maybe this is just slightly more of a personal thing. Like in terms of my personal opinion. But even though that first 40 minutes does have a bit of a slog quality to it, the ending is so brilliant. The commentary is so good. I think I might give this a 9, honestly.
I'm right there with you. This gets a 9 from me.
Yeah, like it's maybe in terms of marrying those two different stories. And again, like I said, if this story looks like it's been written in two different eras, right? Like it's
Yeah, yeah.
two very different things. Maybe that there was a way to more cohesively put that together, and maybe in that way the audience could have been more invested, or well, we could have been made more invested in the um, first 40 minutes. But it's what we got was so
Mm.
brilliant that I really I can't physically give it any
Well,
lower than a 9. It's
it
just
makes
so
me.
good.
It's really surprising then that this story was first dreamed up in 2010, because by the time you get to the end of it, it's like I physically can't imagine this story working without that final twist. And
Yeah.
in that to that effect, I'm like, there must have been huge redrafts because no way you tell this story with Matt Smith's Doctor.
Yeah. Yeah,
No way
for
you do
sure.
that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um and yeah, I think that's why I say, and it feels like it's written in two different eras, but it's brilliant
Hmm.
in the way that it works.
Here's a question for you. Of the uh, episodes we've discussed, not just for this season, but for the entire podcast so far, is this Russell T Davies' best standalone script?
That is a tough one because he's had
Still
some
think
good
Midnight
ones.
is his. I still think Midnight is
Mm,
his magnum opus, but we haven't got
mm,
there yet.
yeah. I mean, yeah, to be fair, like the season 1 finale was pretty good, but
Yes.
um yeah. No, I think this is his best script. I love that season finale, and it's I guess more epic in its scope because it's, end of
Hmm.
the world thing and the Daleks invading. But in
Yeah.
terms of ambition, and not only ambition but uh perfect um writing craft on display, right? The fact that he's not only being very ambitious with what he's saying thematically, but he's weaving it in so effortlessly. In terms of that, certainly, yeah, I think this is his best script that he's written that we've reviewed so far.
And even just zooming out a little bit, like since space, no, even well, let's also go back to the Starbase. I just want to rattle off the average score that we've given each episode
Mm,
in RTD2 so far. Starbase
mm,
6.5, Wild Blue
mm.
Yonder 9, The Giggle 8, Church on Ruby Road 8, Space Baby 7.3, The Devil's Cord 8, Boom 9, 73 Yards 8.5, Don Bubble 9. I don't remember the last time Doctor Who has been this consistent
Yeah, I was gonna say we're
ever.
getting banger after banger here. Like it's it's like how you said you're watching some of the earlier episodes and like Doctor Who is back. I think
Mhm.
it to get to that point. Maybe I think it was mainly just because it's dealing with more supernatural stuff, and I'm more used to the hard
Yeah.
sci-fi elements in Doctor Who. But I can now safely say, and it's not just with this episode, but I think largely with this episode, yeah, Doctor Who's back, and oh, we're so lucky to have it.
Yep.
It's great.
And yet, there's only 3 episodes left of the season.
Mm.
This has just flown by. We've gone.
Yeah, it's been wild.
Yeah. So next time, It's the Bridgerton episode that we've been promised for so long. It's
Mm,
been heavily advertised. I think we've known about this one for like a
mm,
year and a half. Um,
mm. Yeah.
and it's called Rogue. No idea why, but I'm excited to find out.
Yeah.
Um,
It's also apparently not really a historical episode. It seems to be set in
yeah,
some
set in the
some
future or on an alien world or something like that. Yeah, which
yeah,
is interesting.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and to everyone
And
listening at home, don't be a Lindy.
yeah.
That's our message to you.
Mm,
Be a good person.
don't be a Lindy.
And also, don't watch this episode and complain that Doctor Who's gone political and
Yeah.
woke. I can't stress that enough. I haven't
Yeah.
seen anyone do that yet, but I'm positive that there's people who are biting their tongue and
Because the
not
thing is,
sharing what they think.
I don't think I've seen I don't think racism has been confronted as strongly or directly in Doctor Who as it has here, and that includes the moment where Capaldi punches out a racist.
Yeah,
Um, but it is still completely thematically consistent because
yeah.
the Doctor has always been against bigotry. Has Doctor Who dropped the ball in terms of, um, you know, having racist elements in its history, in the classic series especially? Absolutely. But as I have said from the beginning, it is a leftist show. It always has been. And this story is completely thematically consistent with everything we've seen with Doctor Who. So, frankly, if you have a problem with it, then whatever.
It's rare that our analysis extends into the outro, but there you go.